Table, Norm Thompson. Nice to see you, Norm. Russell Gray, and the Tanya Winslade and Alistair Cameron. I think have I covered everybody? Yep. So, who's leading off?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can just give a very brief introduction to the report. So you'll recall back in June when the governing body approved the introduction of the accommodation provider targeted rate, that there were a number of resolutions associated with that, one of which was that staff would report back on alternative governance arrangements of ATEED so that commercial accommodation providers could have greater input into relevant activities, and of course those activities cover visitor attraction and major events. And so I just really want to run you through two points. Firstly, the process that we've undertaken in order to be here making a recommendation to you today, and secondly, just to clarify what that recommended option is. In terms of process, we established a working group which included accommodation provider experts. Norm and Russell were kind enough to sit alongside us on that group, and it was that group that really helped us to develop and refine the options, the 6 options as set out in the report. In terms of the recommended option, there are 2 parts to it. The first part is that a director with accommodation sector expertise would be appointed to the ATEED board. Just to clarify that would not be an extra appointment to ATEED, but rather it would follow the current board appointments policy and process that we already have in place. And the second part would be that ATEED establishes a subcommittee which includes targeted ratepayer representatives sitting on it to consider destination-related activities like visitor attraction and major events. That recommended option is supported by the working group, which includes ATEED, and we went out to consult more widely with targeted ratepayers, and that was their preferred option.
Thank you very much, Tanya. Is there anybody else on the that wants to speak at the end table, or might draw you in to answer questions if that's appropriate? So, councillors, we have in front of us recommendations about how we address our earlier resolution from the governing body, both with the appointment of a director to ATEED that reflects a background in accommodation, and a subcommittee to have input into how the money that is spent on events and visitor attraction, how it should be prioritised. So I'll first of all take questions from councillors. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Mayor. So on this, the recommendation is to appoint a new director to the board with skills or knowledge of the accommodation sector. But of course, we don't normally appoint somebody just on one set of skills. We want a balance and a fit with the balance of the board. So can you just take us through it? Is there anybody on the board currently? Glenys Coughlin, for example, she's got some tourism experience. There's no one there at the moment with a specifically accommodation skill set.
Through the chair, what was very clear from working alongside the working group was that they did not see the current members on the board as representative of the accommodation sector.
Okay, so in seeking somebody with accommodation sector experience, we want more than just that skill set. So what else would we be looking for? I'm mindful of our ambition to work more in the economic development area, possibly. So would we be adding to that skills matrix in some way?
Yeah, through the chair, look, I think the point probably is that is a skill set we would be looking for on the board in addition to those other skill sets that you've sort of articulated. And what we've said is that we would work through the normal appointment process to make sure we find an appropriately skilled director. So it just can't be their sole skill in life is representing the accommodation sector. They have to have all the appropriate skills of being a director. But this will be something that the Appointments and Performance Review Committee will have to work through next year when we're looking at the makeup of the ATED board, just to see what the balance of skills are on that board, where the weaknesses. And I guess what we're effectively recommending is that somebody who represents or has experience in the accommodation sector, that's added as one of the skills we're looking for on that board. It doesn't replace any other skill.
Okay, and one final question, Mr. Mayor. Was consideration given to a direct appointment to the subcommittee as opposed to the board? In some ways, with the City Centre Advisory Board, it's an advisory board. It's not the ultimate decision-making group, but it's made up of members who reflect where the targeted rate comes from. So was that considered?
So, through the chair, yes, so that will be one of, under the proposal of the subcommittee, that will be one of the things that we still need to work through in terms of criteria for appointments to that subcommittee.
No, but the first motion, Chair, says that appoint to the board. I'm saying, was the option of not appointing to the board, but appointing to the subcommittee? Or can Transport have people appointed to subcommittees and not the board? That's what I'm exploring here.
Through the chair, yes, that was explored. It was, sorry, I don't want to speak on behalf of the accommodation experts, but it was felt because the subcommittee is a recommendation-only body, it does not make decisions, that having someone with expertise who's sitting at the decision-making table in terms of sitting on the ATED board in conjunction with those advisory members on the subcommittee was preferred.
So,
Okay.
so just to be clear, we're recommending somebody at the board table as well as the subcommittee that works through the events and the spend of the money in this part of ATED's business. So that subcommittee will be made up of 6 members, 3 of which will be from ATED, 3 of which will be representatives from the industry. They'll be the ones doing effectively, a lot of the hard work on these proposals, but ultimately, as Tanya says, that's not a decision-making body, that's a subcommittee that recommends to the full ATED board, which is why the industry was keen to also have a representative sitting on the decision-making body. So we're accommodating them at both levels, at the subcommittee and at the board level.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I wonder if I might, through you, we're very lucky today to have Norm Thompson here, who has sat really since 2010. He has been part of our whānau, and I know how invaluable it's been to actually have directors be able to talk about their experience and how the workability, if you like, of this proposal. And I wondered if you'd indulge me by asking Mr. Thompson whether he'd be prepared to give a little insight into how he sees this functioning.
Thanks, Councillor. Certainly, I'm more than happy to do so. I think first and foremost, the collaboration and sharing communication with the industry, I think ATED has done that very well over the years, over the last 7 years. There's regular dialogue with the industry, and certainly ATED has communicated what is being done around our planning, the activities, the successes, etc., etc. Because we now have the industry making a significant contribution as far as the targeted rate is concerned, we're really making that into a more formalised process now, and enabling them to be part of the discussions around the subcommittee in particular. To Councillor Darby's point, if we're able to have somebody from the hospitality, small accommodation and large accommodation sitting around that subcommittee, I think there's going to be even more bolder and greater recommendations being put to the board for the ATED expenditure. But more importantly, it gives them that greater involvement as far as that decision making is concerned, whereas that has been done informally before. They've now got some formal representative around the table in terms of the go forward as far as that position is concerned. So I think, Councillor Fletcher, it actually is strengthening the relationships with those key players in the industry, and when decisions go to the ATED board, it's pretty much known that the industry is very much behind those recommendations in terms of how the investments are being made.
Oh, thank you for that, Mr. Chair. I wonder whether, while you are here, are there any other insights that you could give us today, or any from your experience that advice you would give to this governing body of council?
Wow. I don't want to spend another 3 hours.
Can we narrow that question a little?
Sitting here, the insights that I can give you at this particular point, and given my background and my continued involvement as far as the industry is concerned, we're in really good heart. New Zealand is still very hot as far as the tourism destination is concerned, and as far as Auckland is concerned, we've got a lot more to do to make Auckland an even more popular destination. We've got to get out of this business of Auckland being a transit point to the rest of New Zealand, and we want it to be a destination in itself. You take the holiday segment, for example, they're still only staying here at an average of 2 days. That's not long. And so the more that we can be doing to make Auckland a more attractive place for infrastructure investment, whether that be hotels or tourism infrastructure, making Auckland a better place for tourists to land, I think we're in good shape to be able to go forward with Auckland continuing to be a great tourist destination. But certainly, as far as Auckland is concerned, international tourism is going well. Domestic tourism figures just came out this week. Domestic tourism spend, we should not forget that, and that's going to be an important part of the subcommittee as well, is actually greater than international tourism expenditure, and we do very well in Auckland as far as international tourism expenditure is concerned. And of course, we've got the fantastic new International Convention Centre coming along, and that's going to attract a lot more visitation to New Zealand, and that sort of expenditure is at the high end. So, insight.
Thank you for that note of optimism.
Good position going forward.
We'll finish on that
Your
high
Worship.
note. And, ask questions from Wayne Walker.
Sure. So, couple of questions. First off, and I'm looking at page 22. Has there been any progress on the Mayor's part in discussing with the industry any proposals it wishes to put forward for an industry-led and funded regional tourism organisation as a partial or complete alternative to using a targeted rate?
The answer to that is I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think the industry has come back to us on that. But
That's correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, and the other question I've got is the Mayor still open for considering the elimination of the accommodation provider targeted rate in a situation where the government would have put in place a bed tax or something similar across New Zealand?
Yeah. I've said that if there is a better way, if the government were to legislate for a bed tax, that would be welcomed by me, or an alternative way of funding. But a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush, and I'm not giving away anything unless I've got something better to go with in terms of raising revenue. And I continue to hold the belief that if we're spending money on behalf of the private sector so that they benefit from our expenditure of public money, then I believe they have a role to contribute towards that. My view hasn't changed on that, Councillor.
So, just to clarify, so you would anticipate two taxes then, effectively?
No,
a tax on the part of council for
I
accommodation and a bed tax?
I never said that at all, Councillor. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. My views on the provided targeted rate are well known, so I won't restate. But just if you could maybe indulge me, and maybe it's a rhetoric, on Roman numeral 1. So I would assume that in the appointment of a director with accommodation sector expertise, if you're making your selection wisely, that director would probably bring to the table experience in investment capital, capitalising property, employing people, tourist promotion, establishing links with the tourist events and the conference industries. They would be the kind of skill sets that you would expect that person with accommodation sector expertise to bring to that board. Is that correct?
Well, That
That's-
actually is a
that-
decision for the Appointments and Review Committee, councillor, and yes, we'd be looking for all of those things and the best combination of those characteristics that we can find in a single individual.
Answer
Right.
the question.
Are there any comments on this issue? We have a consensus from the working group and from ATEED about how we best deal with this. Seems to be a good way to run with it. Comments, Alf
No,
Filipina?
it was still on the question,
Okay,
Your Worship.
yep, last question
In
then.
regards to the remuneration, and how much would that be? I know from the report that in 2016, the board went from 8 to 7. So there is a comment in there around the remuneration for the new director, and also the remuneration, if any, for the subcommittee with our targeted, with our targeted payers on there. So look, it's just really around that.
Through the chair, in terms of the remuneration for the board appointment, that's not an extra appointment, so there's, the AT board is currently 7 members, so this would fill a future vacancy. The report refers to an appointment under the current work program in most likely 2018-19, so there wouldn't be any extra remuneration there. The board would remain at 7. In terms of the AT subcommittee, that will be a matter to be worked through with ATEED in terms of those appointments to the subcommittee.
As in the remuneration.
Yes.
So on the report, there's a note there that it has to be considered if there's another appointment, albeit that it went from 8 to 7. So there is a note on there. So are you saying that there's really, that the new director will not be getting paid? Or it won't count? That's what I'm trying to clarify.
No. Through the chair, we're saying that when a director's appointment who currently sits on the board is up, when they come off, we will then replace it with this new director.
With this new one?
Yes, that's correct.
And so it'll still stay at 7 then?
That's right.
Okay.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Cooper,
Thank
is this
you.
a question or a
Question,
comment?
just,
Okay.
no, I support the resolutions. Question is, so the subcommittee, 3 members of the industry, but are they, where it says ATEED members, does that mean board members as a normal subcommittee of a CCO or any governance board, which mean there wouldn't be extra payment?
That's right.
It's just part of their duties as AT directors, and then one of those people would include, when the time comes up, the new person with those skills, to clarify the conversation about money.
Through the chair, yes, that's a presumption we're working to at the moment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right. We'll come now to comments. Are there any comments that anybody wants to make? Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'm
Sorry,
happy
just before I go to Councillor Simpson, I'll formally move the recommendations A to F, and I think seconded by Councillor Simpson.
thank you, Your Worship. I'm just speaking in support. I think this is the promise we made to the industry when we looked at bringing this in, and I believe that this is now delivering on our promise, and indeed it's delivering on our promise and a little bit more. So I'm very happy to second the...
Thank you. Any other comments? If not,
I'll make a quick comment.
we've got Councillor Hills and then Councillor Newman.
Thank you. No, just quickly, I just want to thank everyone, and not everyone's here, but for the way that this has come together and the agreement, and that I think it's a good thing going forward for not just the targeted rate, but for ATEED and for the council and the sector to be working closely together and have common goals and priorities, and building on all the good work that has been done the last 5 or 6 years on the visitor attraction and the economic activity in Auckland, but based in Auckland, and actually celebrating what is here and the reasons to stay here, which I think has really flourished for many reasons, but also for the relationship that's built. So just want to thank you all for working so well together and coming to a good place. So that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Newman.
Yeah, not going to restate old arguments, Your Worship, but just to point out, I think that whilst I think this isn't a bad idea, and whilst I think that in the selection of the appointments and panel will make later on, it can enhance and deepen the range of skills on the ATEED board if it chooses in relation to someone with deep experience in the commercial accommodation sector. I think the timing just is a little bit untidy, given that we're running through a debate 10-year plan which touches on things like Airbnb and some of the other parts of the industry that are not currently covered. There are still real concerns within this industry as to the appropriateness of a targeted rate based on capital value, and I would imagine that those concerns won't be alleviated fully whatever the outcome in relation to widening the net to pick up Airbnb and what have you. I'm very, very interested to see how the conversation goes. And if you could report back on the government's appetite for the introduction of a bed tax, because I think that is important to the debate about the future of this targeted rate.
Thank you very much. There being no further speakers, I will put recommendations A to F. They'll be moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary, no. Carried. And can I thank Norman, Russell and Tanya and Alistair for their contribution.
Thank you.
But particularly for their hard work actually in bringing this together.
Absolutely.
I think to get everybody agreeing on that is a really important step forward. So thank you very much for your input into it.
Very well done.
Councillors, before we break for lunch, I think we might be able to get through item number 12, which is the process